I didn't arrive at this understanding through fear. I arrived through repetition. The same subtle reaction, showing up in different places, on different days, without a clear reason. I remember finishing a meal that should have felt nourishing and noticing a familiar heaviness settle in. Not sickness, not pain, just a quiet sense that my body had shifted again. That was the moment I realized exposure wasn't limited to where I lived. It was woven into ordinary routines. Before I go further, I want to gently orient us. This is how I show up right now. I use an AI version of myself so I can share clearly and consistently without pushing my nervous system past its limits. Everything I talk about here comes from lived experience, real research, and a lot of trial and error. If you're here because your body feels confused, dismissed, or unsettled in ways that don't line up with what things look like, you're not imagining that. And you're not alone. For a long time, I thought mycotoxins were only a concern inside visibly moldy buildings. I believed exposure was something you could point to and then leave behind. What I didn't understand yet was how mycotoxins can show up through multiple pathways, through air, through dust, through water-damaged spaces, and sometimes through food that looks completely normal. This realization didn't come all at once. It came through pattern recognition over weeks and months. Certain environments felt heavier on my system, even when they were clean and familiar. Certain foods left me feeling foggy or inflamed in a way that didn't match intolerance or allergy. It wasn't consistent enough to blame one thing, but it was consistent enough to notice. At the time, I thought I was becoming overly sensitive. I told myself I was reading too much into normal fluctuations. That belief kept me dismissing signals that were actually information. My body wasn't overreacting. It was responding to cumulative input. There was a misunderstanding I carried for a long time. I believed that if something affected me, it should do so immediately and obviously. I didn't understand that mycotoxins can create low-level stress that doesn't announce itself right away. It layers. It accumulates. And it can show up differently depending on what the body is already managing. Looking back, I can see how this played out across systems. My nervous system stayed alert longer than it should have. My digestion felt unpredictable. My energy dipped after exposures I couldn't explain at the time. None of it felt severe, but together it kept my system from fully settling. Over longer stretches of time, something important became clear. When exposure sources became more consistent and predictable, my body softened, not suddenly, gradually. The fewer variables my system had to navigate, the less effort it needed to stay regulated. This helped me understand why recovery felt nonlinear, why progress sometimes reversed without warning, why stability required more than just leaving one environment. My body wasn't confused. It was navigating a landscape with multiple inputs. As a parent, this awareness shifted how I listened. I noticed how my children responded differently. One born in 2016. One born in 2021. Their reactions weren't dramatic. Small changes in mood, energy, focus. It reinforced something important. Exposure doesn't need to be obvious to matter, and bodies communicate differently. What mattered most for me wasn't identifying every possible source. It was learning to respect my body's responses instead of arguing with them. That respect reduced pressure, and reduced pressure allowed regulation to return. If you're noticing reactions that don't fit neatly into one explanation, I want to offer this gently. Your body may be responding to layered exposures that don't announce themselves clearly. That doesn't mean you need to live in fear. It means awareness can replace self-doubt. As we move toward the end of this reflection, I want to ground this in something steady. Understanding that mycotoxins can come from multiple sources didn't make my world feel smaller. It made my experience make sense. Healing didn't come from eliminating everything. It came from reducing load and allowing my system to experience consistency again. If you want to read more lived reflections like this, where I explore mold, mycotoxins, and recovery through experience rather than instruction, I share them at indoorarinsights.com. It's simply a place where I put language to the everyday experiences that once felt confusing. For now, you don't need to track every exposure. You don't need certainty. You're allowed to listen to your body's patterns and trust that awareness itself is part of healing.